harder, stack those sats, don't stack the dollar.
Right. Now, it's been kicking off a little bit in the UK this week because the government has announced mandatory digital IDs. If you want to work moving forward, you need the digital ID. And this is leading up to the whole central bank digital currency, social credit score system, whatever, all that good stuff that is just a conspiracy, I'm sure. But that made me start thinking, what kind of Bitcoiner am I? And it reminded me of a few things. If you remember back to one of the first videos I did called Why I'm Chasing One Bitcoin, the original intention was as a pension plan. I've started to stack Bitcoin because I've lost faith in the fiat system, and I also don't have faith in many third parties at all, really, including, you know, private pensions and all that kind of stuff, because my mum got burned with her pension. They basically kept kicking the can down the road. They said, you can take it at 60. When she got to 60, they said, oh, you can take it at 62. When she got to 62, you can take it at 64. And eventually she was allowed to take it at 66. So I, for a long time, haven't been comfortable with third parties that I don't have any control over, I don't have any trust in either. So I was looking for an alternative, and that was, for me, Bitcoin. But I'm thinking of it from another angle now as well. I also remember back to when I went to the Prague conference, and I met a couple of people there who had basically already fully opted out of the fiat system, and they were living fully on Bitcoin. And one of those was an English guy who left the country, and I remember him quite clearly saying, you know, oh, you know where your tax money goes, right? You know, it just goes to pay the government's debt, and you know they fund wars and all that kind of stuff. I was like, yeah, I'm not that comfortable with it, but I also don't want to fight the tax man. And he was laughing a little bit because he was a bit shocked. He was like, oh wait, so you know this, you know where your tax money goes, and you know how corrupt the system is. What are you doing? What are you doing? And that made me question myself a little bit. I was like, it's a very good question. And this whole digital ID thing that's kicked off this week, now I'm thinking even more deeply into it. I'm thinking, what am I doing? You know, what is the solution? And I had started looking into pensions again, because I spoke to somebody and they were more knowledgeable on that side of things than me, and they said, well, there is actually a benefit to paying into a pension. Now, my current day job does offer a pension plan, and I stopped paying into it. I was only paying about £35 or £40 a month, something like that, about 40 or something. And I thought, forget this, I'm not going to pay into this. I'm just going to buy Bitcoin with that money instead, or save it to buy Bitcoin. And I started looking into it a little bit more, and I was like, actually, you know, if I put that 5% contribution into a pension, you get a little tax break because you don't pay tax on that 5%. Your employer then contributes a certain percent as well, so you end up, you know, getting more than you would originally. But obviously the downside to that is you can't touch it for 20 years, at least 30 years, whatever. But I was like, yeah, okay, it sounds sensible to me. It sounds reasonable and rational to me. But now I'm starting to think once again that with this whole digital ID thing incoming, there is no second best, there is no alternative, there's no better solution to that whole thing than holding Bitcoin in self-custody yourself. And you know, you could have MicroStrategy shares, you could have a pension, you could have a Bitcoin ETF, whatever, all that stuff. But you still don't truly own those things. You're still trusting a third party to a certain extent. And there could be another time coming soon, like we had in COVID, where we had this whole narrative of, well, you know, if you don't do this, if you don't take this jab, you can't travel ever again. You can't leave the country. If you don't take this jab, you can't work again. And you know, maybe this whole digital ID thing will be that round 2. So it would be like, oh, you've not got your digital ID, or you can't access your pension until you sign up to this. Or, you know, this pension is now, it's not in pounds, it's in digital pounds. So you can't actually access that unless you sign up to this XYZ. Who knows, but it's, by the time I come to take my pension, who knows what this country will be like. So I'm now starting to lean even more so into holding exclusively Bitcoin in self-custody being the only solution, the only way to opt out of that crap. And I was also thinking, well, let's say I decide to just jump ship and I think, you know what, I'm not doing this in the UK. I'm gonna go and chip to Madeira or Portugal or wherever. What would I need to leave and start again? Well, the beauty of Bitcoin is you could literally have your entire wealth in your pocket, jump on a plane and arrive in Australia or wherever you want with your whole wealth in your pocket. You don't even need it on a hardware wallet in your pocket. You could remember your seed phrases in your own head. So there's no other form of money that you can do that with. And I was also reading in the week that Vietnam recently has tried to, oh, she's going after a rabbit. She didn't get it. She never gets them. I was also reading that Vietnam this week introduced the digital IDs and they've frozen 86 million bank accounts until those that comply with the digital ID do it. They're then going to get access to their bank accounts again. And also during COVID, I'll use that as another example, that Canadian trucker protest where the truckers that didn't want to take the jab, but it was mandated they had to in order to cross the border between Canada and America for their job, they protested and their bank accounts just got turned off. They were debanked. So these things are really, really easy for the establishment to do as a form of coercion. You know, do this or we'll debank you. Okay, well, good luck doing that with Bitcoin. If you've got Bitcoin in self-custody, good luck. So to me, I can't see any other life raft, any other option if you are that way inclined than to stack Bitcoin as much as you possibly can and hold it in self-custody. So if I was to jump ship, as I was saying, how much would I need? Well, I'm almost at 0.1 at the minute. But I think 1 would be enough. I think if somebody was to have 1 Bitcoin, that would be enough for you to just say, okay, I've got 1 Bitcoin in self-custody. I don't like the state of this country, or whatever country you're in. I'm gonna up sticks and I'm gonna move somewhere else. I think you could comfortably do that if you had 1 Bitcoin in self-custody. So that's fired me up even more so to stack even harder, really. But there's also a bit of a psychological thing, a bit of a mental thing as well, because, you know, doing that kind of thing is a big move. Bitcoin only clicked with me probably a year ago now, maybe just less. So it's still super new. And, you know, you do hear of people where it clicks. They research Bitcoin for a few weeks, it clicks, and then they're all in. They sell everything, and that's it. They're fully Bitcoined up. They've Bitcoined their entire life, and that's it. They've jumped ship in one move. They've jumped in at the deep end, and I very much respect that and admire that. But that's a ballsy move, and yeah, that requires balls. So we'll see. We'll see. If I have to do that, well, it might be an option. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where things go. But I was just pondering then, how much do you need to jump ship? How much would you need to literally leave everything, start again somewhere else, and, you know, be chilling in Madeira, chilling in Thailand, wherever, and start again? I reckon 1 Bitcoin. So it was a pension plan. It was a long-term pension plan, but the way things are going, it might now have to be a emergency get the fuck out of here plan. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah. In the meantime, stay humble, stack sats, all that good stuff. See you later.
Buy a little lower, try a little harder, stack those sats, don't stack the dollar. Buy a little lower, try a little harder, stack those sats, don't stack the dollar. Don't stack the dollar. Buy a little lower, try a little harder, stack those sats, don't stack the dollar.